I'm sure you've all dreamt of role-playing a farmer within the Forgotten Realms, so I'm going to show you how you can do that today. Before I show you the build, I'm going to show you where to pick up a couple of sickles. First of which we can find inside the swamp here. If you're lucky, you'll pass this investigation check with Karlach. And so you will automatically see that there are red caps in the swamp here. They won't attack unless you attack first. And you will see that they have sickles. Now, they won't drop the sickles if you just go and kill them. You have to make them drop them. At this level, there's probably two main ways that you could do this. One is to try and use command drop. There they are. They've dropped the sickle. The other way would be to use disarming strike from a battle master. And the reason we're coming here to collect this sickle, as you can see here, it's a 2d4 weapon. So you can dual wield these sickles. Well, not just these sickles, any sickles, because they are light. And you don't need the dual wielder feat. And they do more damage than they probably should do for a light weapon. Most other light weapons do 1d6 damage rather than 2d4. It's not a massive upgrade, but it is an upgrade. So I'm going to bounce around a few save files to show you where to find a couple of sickles, and then we'll get on to the actual build itself. The second sickle can be found in the Underdark, in the Festering Cove where the Kuatoa are. And I do see online people every now and again are like, oh my gosh, there are some Kuatoa down here. I never found it. So if you are one of these people, I just want to point out over here is where the Arcane Tower is. There's the beach down there. This is where you find the billet. Come down these stairs, or well, the rock really.
Wonder if the gods are watching me.
Head this way, jump onto a couple of, I guess, mushrooms. You come down the cragged rock, but before you do, quick bonus if you've never come here before. Here we can find the Helmet of Autonomy, which gives the wearer proficiency in wisdom saving throws, which I think is a very good helmet early on. Anyway, we come down here, the Festering Cove, and over here we will see some Kuatoa, who are worshipping something. Now it's actually Baldur the Zealous, which is holding a, well, can't really see the sickle on him, but if you kill him, he's got a sickle. You can pickpocket it. You can also, if you speak to him and get him on your side, buy it from him. There's a very small window of opportunity to do that. It's quite funny because Baal is the god of murder, not Brual. And you can try and work out what's going on. I would suggest you give it a go. So we passed the first investigation check.
Blade.
There we are.
It's no religious totem. It belongs to a common red cap.
You can actually offer up one of your party members and kill them here if you want to. I'm not going to do that here. We're going to try and persuade the Kuatoa. Probably won't work. So I'm going to have to kill the Kuatoa, and then we'll pick up the sickle from Baldur. So you'll see here on Baldur the Zealous, we get the sickle of Bual. So I'm going to pick this up and jump to a different save file to show you the build itself. So I've dubbed this character the Sickle Master. I am in Act 3, I am just showing you through Withers, and the first level is going to be Monk. And this isn't because we're going to be putting lots of levels into Monk. This is purely so we can use... Where is it gone? Here we are, Martial Arts Dextrous Attacks. Attacks with monk weapons and unarmed attacks scale with dexterity. This is so we can pump loads of our ability points into dexterity because it's such a good attribute to have. This will affect our armor class, this will affect initiative, our damage, our to hit rolls, all the good stuff. I chose Half Orc because we're going to be getting quite a few attacks. We can have advantage in our attacks. We're going to get a few critical hits. Not a huge amount, we're not massively focused on it. You could use almost any race that you want, but it's a nice little bonus here. Savage attacks, when you land a critical hit with a melee weapon attack, you deal an extra dice of weapon damage. That means an extra 1d4 damage. Yeah, it's not great, but it's something. Plus, it's nice here, when you reach 0 hit points, you regain 1 hit point instead of being downed, and we have some dark vision, and we can move 9 meters per turn. That's going to change later on. The next 5 levels are then going to be in Barbarian. This is where most of our power is going to come from. So we can rage, and we have unarmored defense, which will add our constitution modifier to our armor class. At level 2 we get our reckless attack. We have advantage on dexterity saving throws against traps, spells and surfaces. Then at level 3 we get to choose our subclass. I'm going for a slightly thematic thing here, going for Wild Heart. I believe someone who is good with sickles would probably be some sort of farmer in nature. And for the besto heart here, I'm going for Bear Heart because do you know what? One of the downsides is we're probably going to take a fair bit of damage, so we need to mitigate that. One way of doing that is by taking Bear Heart, which gives us resistance to all damage apart from psychic while raging, which I think is pretty cool. We're not going to end up using Unrelenting Ferocity very much here. Not going to rely on it. At level 4 we get a feat. What I'm going to go with is Athlete, just because it's always good to have that extra jump distance. We don't have a particularly high strength, so we don't have a great jump distance in the first place. Plus it helps us even out dexterity to get it up to 18, which I think is more than acceptable. We're going to go up to level 5 in barbarian, so we get our extra attack. Unfortunately, taking 1 level in monk first does mean the downside that we have to get to character level 6 before we get 2 attacks. Once we get there though, we're going to take 3 levels in rogue. We're going to go for thief. This is so we can get an extra bonus action. As for skill proficiencies, I'm going to go from acrobatics and put that into athletics. Get this skill with expertise with athletics. I'm going to keep sleight of hand. It's good to have someone who's good with sleight of hand. You could of course change this if you really want to. We do finally here get proficiency with light armor. And level 2 we get the, oh, this is great. I love multiclassing with rogues. As a bonus action we can hide and dash. This is what we're going to be using every now and again. At level 3 we pick thief for the extra bonus actions, what we really want. And then we're going to go back to barbarian. Now if you're going to follow this build as you level up through the game, I would take a 4th level in rogue as soon as possible to get the second feat. If you are respecking, I would just continue going with barbarian the whole way, end up with a few extra hit points this way. For our animal aspect we are going to go with stallion. This is the second way we're going to try and mitigate damage. So when we dash, you gain temporary hit points equal to twice your barbarian level, which will end up at 8. So we're going to get 16 temporary hit points every time we dash. We're not going to dash every turn. We want to reserve as many bonus actions for attacking as possible. At barbarian level 7, we get feral instinct. I really like this. So an extra +3 bonus to initiative, and we cannot be surprised. So the initiative bonus is going to be +7, which is more than enough. Maybe there are a few bosses that have higher than +7, but for 99% of the fights, you're going to be going first. And then finally, level 8 in barbarian, character level 12, we get our second feat. Of course, as I mentioned, if you're going to follow this going through the game, take level 4 in rogue first. Since we're going to get lots of attacks and we're going to get a few critical hits, savage attacker is going to work in our favor here. Other possible options, maybe putting dexterity up to 20 for the extra +1 bonus to armor class, initiative to hit and damage. Some of you out there seem to love alert so much, maybe you can get extra +5 bonus to initiative. Potentially moderately armored if you want to go with a different armor choice, actually wouldn't be too bad, but it does mean your dexterity ends up on 19. That hurts my soul a little bit, so I'm not going to do that. Sentinel can also work. Make sure you are using the dual wielding though, because it means you get 2 attacks, which is pretty good. There we are. So I'm going with savage attacker. Now since I am in Act 3, you might notice I've actually got another sickle here. I'm using the Wave Mother sickle here, which comes from Alandra Grey in the Water Queen's house. The reason I like this sickle is mostly because it's got a +2 enchantment, and it's still got 2d4 damage, though some of it is cold instead of slashing. That can be beneficial. Otherwise, you're going to be using the red cap sickle from earlier. Now, I've got a mixture of items from all 3 acts here. I'll go through them roughly in the order you would come across them in the game. So first of all, Brood Mother's Revenge. This comes from Korga in the Druid's Grove. Whenever the wearer is healed, the weapon becomes coated in magic and deals an additional 1d6 poison damage. This applies to all of your weapons. The 2 weapons you've got in your hand and plus your ranged weapon. Also from Act 1, the Disintegrating Nightwalkers. This is going to work well with our Snowburst Ring here. So you can't be enwebbed, entangled or ensnared. Can't slip on grease or ice. That's really the reason we've got these on. Plus we get Misty Step, which we can use while not raging. Snowburst Ring comes from Act 2, from the Last Light in fact. So when the wearer deals cold damage, they also create a 4.5 meter circle of ice around the target. But we are immune to slipping on ice, so we don't have to worry about that. Now I do have here the Ring of Regeneration. This is to go with Brood Mother's Revenge. For this, I'd probably recommend Crusher's Ring, something simple, a bit of extra movement speed. Not that this character's lacking in movement speed, but more is always better. We've got the Flawed Helldusk Gloves. We can get these in Act 2, so the weapon attacks deal an additional 1d4 fire damage. You could put any flavour of gloves here that you want, really. By the time you get to Act 3, maybe you could just get the Helldusk Gloves, or you could get the Giant Strength Gloves, which give you a strength of 23. The Enraging Heart Garb, this comes from Act 2 from Lantarv. While raging, the wearer generates 2 turns of Wrath, and this stacks, and also gives Constitution +2. So while raging, in your first turn you'll get 2 turns of Wrath, and it goes down by 1 each turn, but then you get 2. So actually, over time, as the battle goes on and on, you deal a tiny bit more damage every turn. It goes up by 1 every turn, pretty much. I've taken the Wave Mother's Cloak, which also comes from the Water Queen's house. I'll show you what this does in combat, because the description here isn't correct. And the Bone Spike Helmet. This is nice because we're at a barbarian. I use this sometimes on non-barbarians simply for this menacing attack, because every turn we can use menacing attack, which deals a little bit of extra damage, an extra 4 damage here. When you rage, hostile creatures in a 3-meter radius must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or take 2d4 psychic damage. It's not very much damage. I'm not here for this. It's just once per combat you get this anyway, but it's for the menacing attack. Intimidation +2, it's a nice side benefit, I suppose. I'm not going to be doing much with it. So every turn we get some healing, not much, but hopefully we're not taking much damage in the first place because of our bear heart. We will hopefully have some temporary hit points anyway to mitigate damage. When we heal, we get an extra 1d6 poison damage added to our weapons, which is nice. Oh, and sorry, down here, dead shot, forgot to show this earlier. The number you need to roll a critical hit is reduced by 1. I've just taken a bow that gives some sort of, a stat stick you might call it. I'm not really going to be using the bow. We could with this dexterity, but we're not getting many bonuses to the ranged attack. Or you have the Wave Mother's Cloak, maybe you want the Cloak of Protection. Any cloak that's going, there aren't very many cloaks in the game anyway. Maybe the Cloak of Displacement is not bad either. The cloak here doesn't really make or break the build in all honesty. So yeah, the main downside is our lower armor class, but actually that's probably a good thing because it does mean that enemies will be focusing on your barbarian instead of your wizard. Right, off to fight to show you the Sickle Master in action. So here we are.
On my way.
Just because there's a tiny bit of damage done while entering rage next to an enemy. Let's do that. There we are. Explode. It's not much damage, doesn't count for much. We get our 2 turns of Wrath, and I want to point out, I didn't show it earlier, we get the extra 1d6 poison damage from being healed and having Broodmother's Revenge on. So let's start, actually before I start off, let's just get some Bless going. This helps with recording videos. There we are, they fell over. So how much damage did we do? We got 17 here. We're getting 3 on 1d4 because of the reroll. We got a +2 from the enchantment, +4 from dexterity, +4 from proficiency. That comes from the fact that I used this menacing attack. +2 from wrath and +2 from raging, not bad. +4 for cold damage. This gets rerolled. This is why we took Savage Attacker, that feat, because instead of getting 1 damage here, I got 4. And actually, I maxed out the damage on all of the additional damage here, the elemental damage. +6 for 1d6 and 4, 1d4. That is in no way guaranteed every turn. That was somewhat ideal. Gonna use Lacerate because I can. And I do want to point out, if at any point you feel like you want an extra 2 attacks from your last bonus action, you can, but with only 1 level in Monk, you only get 2 key points per short rest. You got to save it for the times it really matters. Boom, lovely critical hit. So even though this is the offhand attack, because of Savage Attacks in the half orc, we got to roll 5d4 and, well, again, pure luck. Because of Savage Attacker, I rolled, although it crosses out the wrong numbers sometimes, I think. Like, this 4 probably shouldn't be crossed out, this 2 should be crossed out, but oh well. I actually rolled max damage. 16 on 4d4, 4 on 1d4, plus a bit from Wrath. Unfortunately, I don't really like this. As a barbarian, we don't get an extra 2 from being in rage. It's not even a huge amount of damage, but yeah, should have been there in my opinion. Anyway, I don't think that was a bad first turn. While I like this area because there's lots of enemies with a decent number of hit points, this alarm really does annoy me. So we're being attacked, taking a very small amount of damage. 3 and 6 because we're a barbarian that's raging. Now, I just took a massive chunk of damage because of these paladins, so the first thing I'm going to do is actually dash to get some temporary hit points. There we are, 16 temporary hit points. That person's going to die on the next turn because of bleeding, so I'm going to ignore them. I'm going to start laying into the next one. Now, I hadn't turned off dual wielding. That was a bit of an accident. I didn't mind it here, actually. It's fine. I was going to do that anyway. The other thing I didn't talk about is elixirs. Go with whatever flavor you want. Potentially Bloodlust. I guess you could go with a Cloud Giant Strength elixir if you wanted to. Or Elixir of Vigilance if you really want to get that +5 initiative. Yeah, it's gone pretty high up anyway. Alright, Gal's going to help sort things out a little bit. But because of these temporary hit points, I haven't taken any damage to my actual health, which is perfectly fine. So I want to point out, I didn't show it earlier, the Wave Mother's Cloak has water layer protection, but actually what it has done is given me an extra 2. It's given me a +2 bonus to my armor class until I take damage. So we go from 17 to 19. In Act 3, 19 isn't actually particularly high, in all honesty. Alright, let's go for this. Oh, yeah. No, let's actually Stop knocking people out. Let's really just take them down, shall we? Offhand attack. Ooh, miss. Now, because I really want to take this guy down, I'm going to use one of my 2 key points here. Could be better. Could probably be a little bit worse. We got one last artillerist left. Artillerist Thamberg. It's not going to be easy to get to him, but because we've got our 2 bonus actions, we can jump over this way. I'm not quite going to make it with the normal movement speed. We get to dash. One downside, I don't know if this is a bug, but dashing while you've got temporary hit points doesn't top up your temporary hit points, so it's optimal to let them run out first. But I didn't have that luxury here. All right. Now you might have noticed that the ice disappeared there, and that's because I'm doing fire damage. So it's only the initial hit where the ice gets created. Thankfully, the fire damage from the initial hit doesn't melt the ice itself on that hit, so it's not too bad. So I didn't point it out during the fight, but if I just come to here, in the final round of that fight, I had 5 turns of Wrath. Now, every turn I was getting an extra bonus to Wrath. The longer the fight goes on, slightly more damage we'll be doing. So by the end, if you've let it last 9 rounds, I suppose, you're going to be doing an extra of 9 damage per hit, which really starts to add up. So that was my take on a Sickle Master, something a little bit different, using the weapons that are probably overlooked quite a lot. And you know what, it's not quite as strong as just having a barbarian rogue, but it's just something a bit different. Trying to use some classic combinations of items like the disintegrating light walkers here with the snowburst ring and the ring of regeneration with the broodmother's revenge, but also the enraging heart garb. I don't see many builds using that, and I rarely see builds using sickles, right? I've had to go out and do this on purpose. But let me know what choices you would make for this build, because again, a lot of these things can be changed. We can swap one thing out for another. What would you have preferred? And have you ever even used sickles in the game? Because, yeah, they're not usually the strongest weapon. Anyway, thank you very much for watching and having a look at my half-orc farmer, sickle, barbarian, rogue, monk build. And hopefully I'll catch you in the next one.